Welcome to Voices of the West. Today we are talking with Bill Shuey, one of our most prolific authors out there. Bill has well over 50 books to his credit. And well, basically, Bill, welcome and tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm a country boy. I grew up in rural Missouri back in the 1940s, served 20 years in the military and the Air Force, and worked with Daniel Floor through the NRC on nuclear power plants, and did some project management work with Texas Utilities, and built self-storage units, and ran a Christian school for a while, and worked in a tomato packing house for a while as a supervisor. And I've done a lot of things. Wasn't any good at any of them.
A whole heap of them. Well, you've gotten a lot of books written, so apparently you've gotten pretty good at that.
Well, that endeavor just started probably 10 to 15 years ago. I had never thought in terms of ever writing one book, let alone more than 50. And if you ask my English teacher, assuming that she would still be alive, she would think it was an abnormality, that's for sure.
I get much the same feeling over my math teacher of 6th grade, but yes. What got you interested in writing? What made you think you could actually write Westerns on things?
Well, my wife encouraged me to write a fiction book. I had written a background book, a research book, as it were, on the migration of Israel. And I published it, and 2 people, I think, bought it. And I'm not sure, it may have been 3, but anyway, my wife said, "Why don't you write a fiction book?" And I said, I have no clue how I would even start to do that. And, I sat down at a word processor and I found, much to my amazement, it's probably the easiest thing I've ever done. I don't know how I do it. I have no plan. I just sit down, and typically I'll just select a title just out of the blue and then work a story around that title and develop a character, make up a name, obviously for the character. And I just kind of do what I see in my mind, what I would do in a given situation.
Very good.
I guess that's the best way to explain it.
So a little bit of you and all of your assorted characters.
Well, my thought process, what would I do if someone was shooting at me from a hill? Well, I'd get behind a rock and shoot back. So that's what my character does, assuming a rock is available. If not, a tree or whatever, I'd find cover and shoot back. And that's pretty logical, I think. And if you try to, at least in my thought process, if you keep these books real, silly stuff I don't think plays well with most readers, especially probably Western readers. I remember Chuck Norris on the old rifleman thing. He didn't have his rifle for whatever reason, or it jammed or whatever. So he picked up a pistol and put a stock on it so he could get more range with it. That don't give you any more range. And it's silly, it's silly stuff like that. I pick it up, so I assume, my readers are going to pick it up. So I try to make it as accurate as possible. No matter how good a shot a fella is, he's going to miss some. So if you have him shooting 10 times and killing 10 people, nobody's going to believe that. I'm just using these as examples, To me, they're just, Westerns are fun to write. To this point, they haven't been greatly income producing, but perhaps they will. Who knows?
Yeah, certainly the more you get, the more people can just read through the entire series and keep buying more and more of your stuff. So it certainly has the great potential for that.
I agree. The potential's there. My wife is having some medical problems that kind of come and go. So I've kind of made a commitment to myself to spend more time with her as opposed to more time writing books for right now. I mean, if she does better, then I'll probably spend more time writing. But we're right on the verge of turning 80. So whatever we're going to do and whatever we're going to enjoy in life. We need to get on with that now, as opposed to say, I'll do it 5 years now. You probably are not going to have a 5 years from now, because that will make us 85. Yeah. Or at least if we're still around, having the cognizant ability and the physical ability to do things gets a little more limited all the time.
Absolutely. Get it while you can at the moment.
Exactly. We're leaving, this is Wednesday, we're leaving Friday going to Europe on a Viking cruise on the Danube River.
Oh, nice. Those are good cruises.
And then we're going on a book signing tour to Colorado Springs for 2 weeks at 2 different places. It's book signing, but it's also vacation, because the weather out there is typically beautiful in June and July.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
And then we're going back to Cairo, Egypt. We're going, not back because I've never been there, but going to Cairo, Egypt in September for 2 weeks.
Excellent.
Doesn't have much to do with Western books, but just letting you know that we do move around some.
It's a very good thing.
Yes, it is.
Of your 50 books, what would you recommend to a first-time reader for picking up first, if they were to start on Bill Shuey books?
I think the best Western book that I've ever written, not the bestseller necessarily, but the best book, is The Montana Cattle Queen, because it has a little bit of everything. It's based on a woman from birth to death, and she does many things during her lifetime, and it kind of mirrors a few women of the time period. They were strong, resilient women, and this gal certainly fills the bill in that respect. Frontiersman is my best-selling book. I don't necessarily think it's the best, but people seem to like it. That's the main thing. I wrote a book called The Indian Fighter. I like it very well. Probably if I was just going to pick up a Bill Shuey book to read for my enjoyment, it would be The Indian Fighter. But he's in the military and the cavalry, and I'm retired from the military, so I guess I would lean towards something that was military orientated.
Very good. What do you think makes a great Western?
I'm not sure I know, because I don't sell a lot of books. You know, if I sold thousands or millions of books, thousands is not going to make you a whole lot of money, but you know, when you get up to Louis L'Amour, Zane Grey territory, maybe John Stone when he was alive, you just have to find something people like. I think that's the key to it. And I don't dwell much on that. I just try to write a story that's interesting. If people like it and buy it, that's great. If people don't like it, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't try to be Louis L'Amour. That would not fare well. Can't try to be anyone else. You use what you have, and if it turns out well, it turns out well. I think most of my books, when I go back and read them in the proofing and editing phase, they're interesting to me. Mm-hmm. I just finished editing the second Hannibal Brinks book, and introduced a guy named Stumpy. I don't remember what Stumpy's last name was, makes no difference at this point. But they became partners in wild horse and longhorn cattle business together. And reading through it, not a long book, about 150 pages, 3,000 words, maybe, give or take a little bit. But it just flowed well, and it was interesting. They got into some scrapes they got out of them, and life didn't always go well for them. You know, they both got hurt, so forth and so on. Those things happen.
Yeah, definitely, particularly if you're going to be shooting at people. It tends to happen.
Yeah, they tend to shoot back. They tend to shoot back.
And those things hurt.
The way it ends kind of leaves the door open where you can take off and write another one with those two characters. You know, they built a big ranching operation or got it well off the ground and made some money. So who knows? I may write another one in that series, and I might do something completely fresh. I don't know.
Yeah, always a good thing there too. What kind of Western have you always dreamed of writing about?
I'm not sure. Your question again?
No, it was, what kind of Western have you long dreamed of writing? Since we're talking about potential new ones.
Yeah, the ones that I've written are kind of sort of about either bounty hunters or Texas Rangers. The Texas Ranger series, I think it's either 7 or 8 books, but they're not all Texas Rangers. Some of them are U.S. Marshals, some of them are deputy sheriffs. It's a family, and they're all, one way or another, involved in law enforcement in the 19th century. So that to me was kind of interesting, because every book you develop a new character. And it's just interesting.
Yes, definitely. What do you think is the most underexposed or underdeveloped part of the Old West?
Probably people's real understanding of the characters that live there. You know, most people, as an illustration, they think of the people migrating west in Conestoga wagons. Didn't happen. They're too big. They're too heavy. They, took a team of 6 oxen probably to pull a Conestoga. You never get it across a ferry. So mostly they used farm wagons and mules, 4 mules to pull them. And I had another thought, but it flew out of my mind. The characters of the Old West, people envision, like you see on TV and movies, the guys coming out in the street and facing each other and seeing who's the quickest on the draw. That rarely, if ever happened. Human beings are not stupid. They get behind a water barrel or something when they shoot at each other. They don't stand in the middle of the street 20 feet apart. So I think people need to look at Westerns logically. Those people were no different than we are today. They just didn't have some of our main conveniences that we enjoy. They didn't have television. They didn't have cars. They didn't have airplanes. They had horses, buggies. And other than that, and outhouses, other than that, they were just us. So when you start relating to my Westerns, I try to make them like us in their thought processes and their priorities, how they interact, one with another.
No, I mean, it was a time of complete change for the entire Western world. Well, the entire world at that point, the Industrial Revolution kicking in. You had trains coming through that were completely unheard of. You could get across the country in a couple days instead of taking months to do it. So yeah, those old wagons that went across there became completely obsolete. The entire experience, as people knew, was gone. Because much like today, everything electronic, everything information everywhere instantly, it's kind of the same story, except just 100 years prior.
Well, it was a progressive movement west. And as more and more people push farther and farther west, they displaced more and more Indians and brought their European diseases with them, which decimated the Indians. I think I read someplace that maybe 2/3 of the the Cheyenne Indian tribes were killed by diseases that the white men brought with them, from Europe and from their settlements in the east. They had built up a resistance to smallpox and things like that, but the Indians had never encountered that stuff. So when they got infected and started spreading it just spread like wildfire, and it'd go through half a tribe in just no time. And the second factor that made the migration happen faster was that they killed the food supply. The Indians depended on the buffalo for everything. They ate it. They made their teepees out of the hides of the buffalo. They used the bones for this and that. They used tendons to sew with and so forth and so on. Everything, even the buffalo dung, they used to make campfires. Once the white man killed all those buffalo, the Indian had no recourse but to go to the reservations.
Yeah, that was.
And it enabled us to populate the West and all the way to California. But it was at a high cost to the people that were here before us. And no matter how far back in history you want to go, the stronger always displace the weaker. That's just the way human beings are.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily a good thing, but it's the way history works or has worked.
The way it's always run so far up till now, yes. No reason to believe it's going to be any differently than that.
Probably not.
What's the best advice that you've ever been given for writing?
I don't know if anyone ever gave me any advice. No one, I've taken numerous college courses in English composition, but really that's kind of a misnomer because they don't teach you how to write. They just assess a grade to your writing. So there's nothing to be learned there. The biggest drawback to my writing was that I didn't pay much attention in English classes in high school. And back then it was real dry. It was all diagramming. So luckily I have a good team of proofreaders and editors, and they catch all my, I say they catch 99% of all my errors. I can pick up a book from Random House or Penguin or one of these big things, and I can find mistakes in it. You don't get anything 100% clean. It just doesn't happen.
And then you get second, third, fourth revision and all that coming out. Yes.
Yeah. And I can pick up a book I wrote 6 months ago or whatever, that's, I'm not envisioning what it should say, and the human mind does that. That's why it's so difficult to proofread your own work, because when you're sitting there reading it, you know what it's supposed to say, and that's what your mind sees. So I go through it, and I've got, most advanced word processing, editing tools that I can find, and they make it easier. It gets easier all the time because I find better tools all the time to help.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But as far as someone telling me how to write, no one ever did. As far as anyone really critiquing my writing, no one ever has. I don't know. It's just something that I fell into, that I find easy to do. That doesn't mean I'm a great writer. I just find it easy to do. And it's amazing to me looking back. How in the heck did I write more than 50 books? I don't know.
Where do they keep coming from?
Don't know. My wife is amazed. I'm, I guess, reasonably intelligent, but this was a talent, if it is indeed a talent, that I didn't even know I had.
Yeah. Very fun thing to explore and develop on all of that. Tell me a little bit about when you get down to actually writing books. You said before you come up with an idea for a title in your mind, and then you go through and you start to assemble the whole thing. Do you put a lot of research into the books you put into? What's your overall process for going about assembling one?
I give you an example. In the Bounty Hunter series, the 4th book in it, the title is If and Smith. And I just pull that out of the air because when he was born, his father said, if and he looks like me, he's mine. If and he don't, he ain't. So that's where we start with the book. And he's in down below Branson, Missouri, grows up, and you would have to visit that part of the world, in Missouri specifically, in Arkansas, to know what those people are like. And I've been down there when I was a child fishing with my dad. It's a unique place. You've heard of the ball knobbers, I suspect, and things like that. Well, he's a killer, stone cold killer, barefooted, in overalls. And that's the way I developed him. And it just kept going. As far as research, I researched to make sure that if I'm in 1867, I'm not using a pistol that was made in 1873. Again, people who read Westerns, or at least the ones I talk to, are fairly knowledgeable. I saw a cover, and it may have been a DSP author, I don't know. Anyway, I saw it on Facebook. Someone was promoting a book, and it was set in 1850 something, and he's carrying an 1873. He was a gunfighter. And I sent the guy a note, and I said, well, he certainly has an advantage. They can make that gun for another 20 years. And he didn't appreciate that, but I just wouldn't want to put something that out out like that for the public to see. You know, I'd rather the public guess about whether I'm an idiot. I don't want to confirm it. So when I mention a place, I make sure it existed during that time period. If I mention a person, then I research and make sure he was alive and well or whatever during that time period. Again, it keeps it real. When I introduce a real character, I tell you a little something about that character. Hopefully I don't go overboard with it, but I tell you a little bit about him, what he did, so forth and so on. Town, about the development of it, how it came to be. If it's a weapon, I tell you a little bit about the weapon, ballistics of it. I don't go into great extremes, but enough to give you kind of an overview of what you're dealing with. And the feedback I get from people is they appreciate it, find it interesting. Oh, and it's something I do. I don't know if it's the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it. It's just the way I do it.
You're keeping realism into that and not necessarily overly belaboring every fine detail that could possibly exist on that.
Well, you can make it awfully dry and boring, and I try to avoid that. You know, if it's Sedalia, Missouri, you know, I tell them when Sedalia, Missouri came into being, and I might tell you a little something about some famous person that lived there or something like that. And that's it. That's all you need to know. If you want to know about Sedalia, Missouri, beyond that, look it up on Google. You can read all day long about it if you want to. But I give you a little overview of the things I mentioned.
Yeah. What would, as no one's giving you advice on things, what advice would you give to someone that's starting out trying to write a Western right now?
Well, I don't know. First of all, it has to be something you want to do. And if you're writing a Western or a story about Elmer Fudd, it doesn't make any difference. If you're writing it with a view of making a lot of money out of that endeavor, you know, you're deluding yourself because it's probably not going to happen. There are thousands of books coming out every day. So you're competing with thousands of books every day, new books, as it were. And the chances of you ever making any real money out of writing books is just, it's a real long shot. You're probably better off going to Vegas and, you know, take a couple $100 out there and think you're going to come back a millionaire, as you would be writing a Western book or any kind of book, thinking it's going to be a great commercial success, because in all likelihood, it's just not going to happen. So if it's what you enjoy doing, if you get a feeling of fulfillment out of doing it, then that's great, do it. But if you're motivated by commercial success, if you need the money, I'd go someplace else to try to make it.
Very true. Well, what are you working on right now?
I just finished Hannibal 2. I've got a general outline in my mind and developed the first couple chapters of a book called Seminole. It's about a particular Indian, young Indian boy, Seminole, in the Everglades. The book starts off with him tracking a panther. He wants to kill the panther to impress the father of this Indian maiden that he's wanting to marry. And he gets so engrossed in tracking this panther that a white guy caught him, a slave catcher caught him. So he becomes a slave and he ends up in Bella Vista Plantation up in outside of St. Augustine, and that's where we're at. He's tending their corn crops on the plantation and trying to figure out how to escape. And you know, I have no idea where it's going to go from there. I just develop it page by page. You know, I don't know anymore what's going to happen on the next page of one of my books than a reader knows what's going to happen on the next page. It's just an adventure to me.
Mm-hmm. How do you know when you're done?
When you run out of things to say. I mean, I'm not trying to be smart or oversimplify it, but when you run out of ideas, I mean, you can only kill so many Indians in a book. You can only kill so many horse thieves in a book. You can only catch so many horses. You can only round up so many cows before it becomes tedious. and you're just saying the same thing over and over. So when you run out of fresh sub stories, then it's time to wrap it up. And DSP makes it fairly easy or hard, depending on your frame of mind, because they want them to be around 30,000 words. And in 30,000 words, if you haven't told a story, you're not going to tell it in 100,000 words. You know, I've written, the Montana Cattle Queen, I think, was close to 600 pages. But it was interesting all the way through. I've never had anyone that bought it and read it that didn't say it was a great book. But you have to have exposure. And the only way you can get exposure is to spend a lot of money to get it. And I have been fortunate. I'm not rich, but I've got more than I can spend unless I just want to throw it away between now and the end of the road, which is not that far off. So why do I want to go out and spend $30,000 to $50,000, $60,000 promoting myself, not even knowing what the return would be? And what would I do with it if I got it? I don't have any children, so I don't have any grandchildren. I don't have anyone to give it to other than charities or things like that.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, and it goes back to commercial success. If I know what I've written is interesting, if I enjoyed writing it, if I enjoyed doing the research, if I enjoyed going through the process of making sure it's real as opposed to the nonsensical, then I've done my job and I've enjoyed it. And what happens with it, that's not my problem. That's Nick Wales' problem.
Yes, indeed.
Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, it's his job to sell them. I did my part, you know, when I put the end on it.
Absolutely. You produce the books and we take them out and sell them. That's keeps it all off of your plate.
Well, you can't sell something that's not good. And you and I don't decide what's good. Our readers decide what's good. So if enough of them decide it's good, and I build up an audience of readers that keep coming back for different books after they, you know, I've got, I don't know, 35, 36, 37 books in the DSP library. So there's plenty of meat there for people to chew on. It's just a matter for them to read one or two and say, I like this guy, and, you know, read the rest of them.
Very good.
But I have no control over that.
So where can people find out more about you and about your books? And
well, I have my own website, www.billshueybooks.com. You go there, it lists all the books I've ever written. It gives you a little synopsis of each book. And these are paperbacks, of course, and or audio books. All of my books are on audiobook and paperback. It's very, the kid that set it up for me is kind of a quasi grandson. You know, we have a good relationship and and such. Anyway, he's built a great website, and you can just one click if you want to go to Amazon and check out. You know, just push a button and you're on Amazon checkout. If you want to pay me for it, click another button, put in your credit card. It flows to me through PayPal, and I'll sign a book and mail it to you. It's kind of neat.
indeed, yes. It's a good way.
Modern technical world that I don't understand, but you know, he set it up, he understands it, and he does it. So
absolutely, and keeps people good interaction with your readers to be able to have them get a signed copy. And so yeah, it's all excellent ways of doing it.
if they want a signed copy, it doesn't cost them a nickel more to get it signed. So that's just up to them. And we take these book tours. There's a big mountain fair festival in Owasso, Georgia. We go there in August, and then they have a big craft festival at the same facility in October. We go there and we sell a lot of books there. And we go to two different places. We used to take off the end of May, and we stay gone until we came back in August and just go from one facility to the next doing book signings. And you sell a lot of books, but also you do an awful lot of setting, and it gets, you know, it gets boring doing this day in and day out for 3 months.
If you did it every single day, yeah, that could get very hard to get through, but you see a lot of territory.
Well, you have days where you're driving and then you get set up for the next one. But I guess my point is it takes up a lot of time. It requires a lot of commitment to do that. So this year I've scaled it back, and next year I may scale it back even further. The only ones we're doing this year are the two in Colorado Springs and the 2 in Georgia at the craft fair and such. Peterson Air Force Base, we're going there for 3 days, I believe it is. And Fort Carson, we're going there for 3 or 4 days. And the rest of the time we'll be at the Penguin Pines RV Park at the Air Force Academy, cooking steaks and drinking a libation or something.
Always a good thing there. Well,
not a bad.
Thank you for joining us today on all of that. Hope you enjoy your upcoming trips over to Europe and Egypt and everywhere else you're going. So you've got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, trying to get some frequent flyer miles built up.
Yeah, those can take a while these days.
I appreciate you having me. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I can kind of ramble on and get foolish with this stuff sometimes. I just enjoy what I do, trying to enjoy life.
Indeed. Best thing we can do.
Yep.
Thank you, Bill.
All right. You have a great day. Thanks again.
You too.